remember it as if it were yesterday. It was one of those scorching hot summers that happened as a child when I was growing up in southern Oklahoma. And my cheap parents that summer finally relented and finally bought the wading pool. Not just any wading pool, the deluxe plastic wading pool. Not one of those little baby inflatable types like they had at the house down the street. This was the one that would hold like 12 inches of water. I would be able to practice my Olympic strokes. I would be able to do cannonballs if I wanted to. I was a little kid. And I remember the day that we brought it home. My parents put it on top of the car, held on to it as we drove just a few blocks back to our house, and as soon as we could, we were filling it up with water from the water hose. We were excited to get in it. We let it set out in the sun for a while, and then it was time for the maiden swim. I was the one chosen by myself to be the first one in the water, and it was wonderful. It was so refreshing. The water was so cool. I had been excited about this day for a long, long time. But then she got in the water. You know, little sisters. She got in, and she got in my way. I was practicing a certain stroke. I was practicing some maneuvers, and I just kept bumping into her. So I decided it was time, as the, self-imposed lifeguard, to remove her from the pool. And I reached down and grabbed my little sister, and I was on my way to put her outside the pool onto the grass. But about halfway through, her slimy, wet body slipped from my fingers, and she fell on the edge of our pool. Yeah, that hard plastic edge of the pool. And it split down two sides, and I just remember the water starting to rush out. I remember panicking and trying to push her on out the rest of the way, and maybe if I just pulled up on the side of the pool, it would stop the flow of the water, and we could preserve the pool. And maybe if I could just hold it up there, the water would stay in. But after a while, I realized there was no hope, and I stood with my mouth open as the contents of my new pool drained into our backyard. That's an image we find in the Old Testament that tells us about what happens when we put our hope in things other than God. That it will be drained, that they'll ultimately completely dry up. I want to welcome you back to our series, The Story. We're walking through the Bible. Welcome our Sapulpa and Coweta campuses, our online viewers. Glad to have you along with us. If you've got your Bible, turn to Jeremiah chapter 2. That'll be the beginning of our text for the day. And I just want to remind you a little bit of the history of where we're at. The kingdom of Israel, God's people now, has been divided into two nations, the kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And God has been sending prophets, and He has been sending warning signs time after time after time. Judgment is coming, judgment is coming. And the northern kingdom were far more evil than the southern kingdom, and God has already relented and opened up His protective hand. In fact, we talked last week about the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel. It was about 721 BC when Israel was taken captive by Assyria. Remember King Sennacherib, who came in and took over and took the people away, and God says, I want them removed from my presence, and they became known as the lost tribe. And from all appearances, as the world is watching on, the exact same thing is going to happen to the southern kingdom. That King Sennacherib is camped outside, and he's going to move on them, and he's going to absolutely wipe them out. Except there's a factor that we talked about, a guy named Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, a guy that was committed to God, a guy, the Bible told us, that did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And what King Hezekiah did was he invited God's blessing into his life and into his kingdom because of his commitment to purity and his commitment to prayer. In fact, not only did he pray asking God to help, that we're desperate, God, and we are absolutely dependent upon you, but he took it upon himself early in his reign to pull out all the idols, to pull out all the evil things out of the temple, and God blessed that decision. In fact, as long as Hezekiah was king, the people of Judah, the nation of Judah, was blessed. It was a good time. Unfortunately, King Hezekiah dies, and his son Manasseh becomes king. He was the worst of all kings. He was the most evil of all kings. The things that his father had taken out, the idols, the evil, detestable things, King Manasseh brought them back. Not only that, King Manasseh sacrificed his own son in the fire to a pagan god. And what we're going to see in the southern kingdom, very similar to what happened in the northern kingdom, is king after king after king who's evil. In fact, there's only going to be really one bright and shining light, a young king named Josiah. If you haven't read his story, you need to go back and take a look at that. And so that's what we've been talking about, is just this continual decline now even of the southern kingdom of Judah. Despite their warnings, Judah is falling the same way. And so God is about to release His protective hand of blessing from them. And He's raising up a world empire led by King Nebuchadnezzar called Babylon. In fact, what we're going to see and look at today is about 606 BC that Judah is going to be conquered by the Babylonians. Now remember, it's Israel taken by the world power at the time of Syria, but it's going to be the Babylonians that come and rule over this particular part of the kingdom now, the southern kingdom. And what King Nebuchadnezzar is going to do, he's going to come in and he's going to raid the temple. He's going to take all the temple treasures out. He's going to take all the young royals back with him to Babylon, including a young man named Daniel. We'll be talking about Daniel a little bit further down the line. Just a few years later, he comes back, and Judah is raided again by the Babylonians. And this time, more people are taken away. This time, a young man named Ezekiel is going to be taken away. Some 10,000 officers and fighting men, artists and workers and craftsmen. Those are going to be the ones that are taken captive in this particular raid. But then I want you to notice it's going to be 20 years after this initial raid, 586 BC, that Jerusalem is finally going to be burned by the Babylonians. King Nebuchadnezzar is going to come in and he is going to absolutely wipe it out, burn the temple and destroy Jerusalem. A process now that's taken about 20 years. In fact, King Zedekiah, the last of the kings of Judah, is going to be dragged, taken away. He's going to have his eyes gouged out. He's going to have his family killed in front of him. The last of the remaining people there are taken captive. In fact, only the poorest of the poor now are going to be left in the kingdom of Judah. And one of those that's left behind is a guy named Jeremiah, one of God's messengers. And God has asked him to stay behind, and King Nebuchadnezzar is going to allow it to stay and to grieve the loss of Jerusalem and to warn the people, plead with the people to turn back to God. In fact, his style is going to be so different, he's going to become known as the weeping prophet. And he's going to continue to warn the people, but they're not going to listen. In fact, even in his reluctance to do what God had told him to do, God, find somebody else. Please find somebody else, God. God finally convinces him, and God says, even though you're going to preach this, the people aren't going to listen. And so what Jeremiah is going to do is going to predict the fall of Judah. And in fact, in his reign, he's going to actually encourage King Zedekiah. You need to surrender. God says to surrender. And he didn't want to hear it. Jeremiah is going to be thrown into a cistern and just be a captive for a while. All this time, Jeremiah warning of this ultimate destruction that's going to come. That's where we're going at today. In fact, Jeremiah chapter 2, I want you to look at the words. Therefore I bring charges against you again, declares the Lord. Notice that, again. God has done it again and again, time after time after time, warning His people. I will bring charges against your children's children. Cross over to the coast of Cyprus and look. Send to Kedar and observe closely and see if there has been anything like this. Okay, what God is saying through Jeremiah is, I want to take you on a little bit of a field trip. I want you to go to these places far removed, and I want you to observe. I want you to look around. What are you looking for? Here's the question. Has a nation ever changed its gods? Yet they are not gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glorious God for worthless idols. Be appalled at this, you heavens, and shudder with great horror. That line right there literally says, your hair be raised up on its end. God's saying, can you believe this is going to happen? It should never happen this way. In fact, what He's saying to this point right here is, look around at the countries around you, Judah. I mean, even those that are worshiping false gods, they're more committed to their false gods than you are to the one true God. They're more consistent than you are. They are more closely attuned. They are more devoted to their false gods than Judah is to its one true God. And then look what he says last. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water. And instead they have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. What Jeremiah is giving for us here is a metaphor about idolatry. And this idea is that they are worshiping these gods, and they are like cisterns that are broken, that don't hold water. They are looking for something other than God to be their source of satisfaction. They're looking for something other than God to quench that thirst that God created within them. And he contrasts that with a spring that brings forth fresh water, a spring that brings forth a good, life-giving water, a spring that comes forth from the ground. The opposite of that is a cistern that is dug into the ground, and it has to be coated with plaster, and the rainwater would come and it would fill up and it would be hold there, but this water would turn brackish and dark colors, and when the rains would cease for a while during the dry season, the water would be gone, it would run out. And these cisterns, they were always cracking, and the water would leak out of them. And what Jeremiah is saying, God's saying to Jeremiah, is to choose a leaky cistern over a fresh source spring of water is just stupid. You're digging cisterns when there's clean water next to you. You're digging cisterns, and instead of receiving what God has for you, you're replacing with something that doesn't give life. Oh, it might get your mouth wet. It might be liquid, but it doesn't satisfy. And we do our own rejection of God by digging our own cisterns, don't we? People of Judah aren't the only ones guilty of that. We dig our own cisterns. Instead of looking to God for comfort, we look to cisterns of food and drinking and entertainment to fill that void, that true need for comfort. Instead of looking to God for significance, we look to the cistern of our career or our accomplishments. Instead of looking to God for security, we turn to the cistern of money and investments and credit. Instead of looking to God for joy, we look to our cistern, our marriage. We look to our children. We look to some hobby. Instead of looking to God for hope, we look to some American ideal or some political party, hoping that something good is going to happen, putting our hope in that. None of those things necessarily wrong. Hear me. Those are not necessarily wrong, but instead of looking to them to help us, we've looked to them as our hope instead. We have put them in God's place. We have put our hope in cisterns instead of the true source, instead of a spring of water. You know what we learn about cisterns is they are hard work. I mean, the problem with a cistern is they were always drying up, they were always cracking, they were always having to be fixed, and they were always having to dig new ones. It was a constant thing, digging into the ground, plastering these things with, and trying to create something that's going to hold water. It was a never-ending thing to provide water in this particular area. And the truth is, some of you are exhausted from always pursuing something. The truth is, some of you are exhausted because you are always chasing after things to make you happy. You're constantly digging a cistern. You're constantly busy trying to find something that's going to quench your thirst. And Solomon says trying to find satisfaction in things other than God is like chasing after the wind. It's pointless, it's exhausting, it's frustrating. And that's exactly what God is telling His people through Jeremiah. It's too much work. You've got the good stuff right next to you. He also goes on to tell them that cisterns are only going to create water that is going to be bitter. It's going to have this bitter taste to us because cisterns always have stagnant water. It's not fresh water. It's not clean water. Verse 19, he says, your wickedness will punish you. Your backsliding will rebuke you. Consider then and realize how evil and bitter it is. You're digging these cisterns that all it is producing bitterness for you. This bitter it is for you when you forsake the Lord your God and have no awe of me, declares the Lord Almighty. That's what happens when you're always tasting bitter water, stagnant water. It's not what God wants for us. It's not what God has best for us. Last weekend, my wife and I celebrated an anniversary, and we had a great time. And being just the great husband that I am for the number of years that we have been married together, and she's put up with me, I took her to a place where no expense was spared. We went to a nice restaurant, nice steakhouse in downtown Tulsa, and made a night of it. And it was a great place to eat. It was the kind of place that you're going to have to sell one of your children to be able to pay the bill for it. But it was a special night, a special time for us. And we celebrated. And I love a good ribeye, and my wife loves a good filet. And we had fun. Can you imagine, though, we had such a good time there that we decided, you know what, let's bring one of our kids back. Let's share a special time with them, and we're going to get them a steak, and they don't get to eat steak very often, and we're going to let them enjoy that. And so we're sitting across the table, and we order one of our boys a ribeye, a great big ribeye, and I mean it's juicy, and it's still sizzling, and it looks good. And instead of them digging into that ribeye, they reach into their pocket, and they pull out a piece of beef jerky. Piece of beef jerky that still has a little bit of lint from their pocket on it, and it's dried out, and they have to work on it a little bit, and they pull on it and finally tear off a piece, and they start chewing on it, and they tell me, no, don't worry about me, Dad. I brought my own. Besides being a little frustrated, besides being a little annoyed, besides being pretty irritated that I had spent my money on this meal that I'd hoped they would enjoy, that we wanted to share this great new place that we'd been to, the truth is I'd be a little bit saddened for them that they didn't get to experience the thing that I wanted them to experience. They didn't get to experience this great thing, and God provides for us. And sometimes we do the same thing. No, God, don't. I brought my own. God, I'm covered. Some of you have experienced that with your own kids. You raised them up to know God. You raised them up in the church, and some of them have gone out, and they dug their own cisterns. And it's heartbreaking for you as a parent to watch them deal with the difficulty and the consequences of their choices, of dealing with the bitterness of their choices. In fact, back to that verse, your wickedness will punish you. I mean, what God is saying to Jeremiah is that sometimes God's going to let us have our way, and the natural consequences are going to be the things that we have to put up with. We're going to deal with the pain and the hurt and the discipline, and we've asked God to give us our own way, and God lets us, and sometimes we're going to be dealing with the pain and hurt of those natural consequences. Is it possible that you have been like the people of Judah? That instead of seeking God in this stream of water, you've said, God, I've got it. And you've dug a cistern and put your hope into something that ultimately, if it hasn't already, is going to leak and is going to dry up. Where is it that you have placed your hope? What is it? What cistern is it that you have been drinking from? And so with tears, Jeremiah is going to be expressing God's heart to his people. Come home. He's just going to keep saying it. Please come home. That message is going to be resounding. Repent. Turn back to God. Have nothing to do with these cisterns. But the people refuse to listen. And so ultimately, Jeremiah's message is going to sound more like this. A lion has come out of his lair. A destroyer of nations has set out. Again, Babylon is going to be coming this way. He's left his place to lay waste to your land. Your towns will lie in ruins without inhabitants. So put on sackcloth, lament, and wail, for the fierce anger of the Lord has not turned away from us. He's been holding it back, but you have continued to dig cisterns. You've continued to choose idolatry over God, and God is going to release, and God is going to let this punishment take place. But I want you to notice at the same time God's heart. In fact, just a few verses later, next chapter, go up and down the streets of Jerusalem. Look around and consider. Search through her squares. If you can find but one person who deals honestly and seeks the truth, I will forgive this city. Look at God's heart in this thing. God's saying, if you can find one godly person, if you can find somebody that'll choose me, then I'll relent. We'll not go through this. And so if you've ever thought of God as vengeful, a God of wrath, you've missed this picture of God right here. Because it's like God is just holding back. I mean, God at this point is weeping as His nation is being removed from the land, the very land that He gave them, and He's still pleading. He's still saying, if just one. If you'll just give me one, it's like He's lowering the bar. And what's happening is, even in His judgment, God is patient and He's merciful. In fact, the New Testament tells us that God is patient, not wanting any to perish, but all to come to repentance. That's God's heart. That's God's desire. He is loving. He keeps warning. He keeps hoping. And if you're a parent, you understand that. In fact, if you're a parent, you've made a threat like this at some time with your children. If you do that one more time, if I have to warn you one more time, this is going to happen. They're going to get a spanking or time out or get grounded or whatever. And it inevitably happens, doesn't it? They do the exact thing that you warned them not to. And what's your response? Well, often it's this. I told you if I have to tell you one more time, I'm not going to tell you again. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's your ultimatum. I'm not going to tell you again. Why is it that we don't punish them the first time? Because as loving parents, we don't want to see our children hurt. As loving parents, we're gracious and we know there need to be consequences for actions, but we really never wanted to follow through to begin with. In fact, what we'd really hoped is that they would just listen to us. Our desire is that they would always be obedient, that they would always be loving, and that all we would have to do would be to love and to care and provide for them and keep giving to them. And that's how God is with His nation. And that's how God still is today with us. He's that kind of God that just keeps loving. Well, finally, after warning after warning after warning, God's judgment is going to take place. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. The people of Judah are going to be removed. In fact, from a lower story perspective, you almost have to ask yourself, as the city's burning and the people are being carried away, God, don't you love these people? God, if you really love them, why did you let this happen? Why did you let them deal with so much? Why put them through so much? But in the upper story, that is exactly why God had to act as He did. Because God loved them so much. I mean, if God continued to bless Judah while they were behaving in ways contrary to His commands, well, it would send a confusing message to people about what it's like to be in community with God. It would be a confusing message about who God is. If He let Judah get away with their horrible behavior, who would want to be in a relationship with God? Look at those people. Who wants to live like that? His love for us is so great and His holiness is so pure that He cannot compromise either. And so just like their brothers to the north, the kingdom of Judah is going to be removed from His presence. But I want you to see, yet in the midst of that sorrow, there's a message of hope. Because in the midst of all these negative messages, and this is the punishment that's going to take place, and this is what's going to happen, God continues to speak through His prophets to the people. God keeps warning His people. He keeps continuing to call them back to Him. In fact, the book of Lamentations, also written by the prophet Jeremiah, written as he's watching Jerusalem be sacked and destroyed. In the midst of this discipline and punishment that takes place in look what he writes. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Remember, this is in the middle of destruction. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed. For His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And Jeremiah is continuing to write and to speak about God's love and about His incredible faithfulness. While we're not faithful to God, God faithful to us. Although the people turned their backs on God, God would still give undeserved mercy and grace. And so Jeremiah, with this remnant, the poorest of the poor people in Jerusalem, and he's continuing to preach hope to those that are left behind. He's continuing to talk to them about their painful experiences and about how God still loves them. And there's a guy, his protege, a young prophet named Ezekiel, who's already been carried away and lives in Babylon, lives in the countryside, and he's speaking to people and giving God's message to people who have already been removed. Some of them already in captivity, some of them already serving as slaves. And I just want to wrap up with his message there. Therefore say to the Israelites, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It's not for your sake, people of Israel, that I'm going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name. It's just been what God has been doing from the beginning. He's just wanting His name to be recognized and for His people to give Him credit. My name which you have profaned among the nations where you've gone. I will show the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, the name you've profaned among them. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the sovereign Lord. These things are happening so that the people of the world will know that I'm the Lord. And when I'm proved holy through you before their eyes, for I will take you out of the nations. Listen to this. This is people that are captive, the people of Judah captive. I will take you out of those nations. I will gather you from all the countries, and I will bring you back into your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you'll be clean. I'll cleanse you from all impurities and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart. Listen to this. And put a new spirit in you. God's up to something right there. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Then you'll live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. It's an amazing message to people that have been carried away, people that have left their homeland. And God says, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to keep loving you. And the people are know that I'm going to be Lord. And there's that hint of the Messiah. I'm going to cleanse you from all impurities. I'm going to put a new spirit within you. Telling us about a Messiah that's going to come. And so this upper story that God keeps telling us is that He wants to live with us. And He will do everything for His people for them to come back to Him. And that message is still true. God's invitation to always come home. God is eager to forgive. God is eager to restore if we let Him. What Ezekiel is foreshadowing right here, some 600 years later, is going to take place when Jesus arrives on the scene. And one of the descriptors that He's going to give of Himself, one of the names that He's going to use for Himself is living water. You remember there in John chapter 4 when Jesus meets a woman who's been married 5 times? In fact, at this time that He meets her, she's living with a man that's not her husband. This woman has dug many cisterns. Maybe thinking every time this next husband, maybe that one's going to make me happy. Maybe this time it's going to be different, and she's worn out. And Jesus meets her at this well. And He's going to tell her about something that satisfies. In fact, look at His words, John chapter 4. Jesus said, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, the water in this well. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Jesus says, I am the water. You've been working and you've been chasing and you've been digging. Stop doing it because I'm the living water. I'm the one that's going to provide for you. And then you know what He says just a couple of chapters later? He says, whoever believes in me, as Scripture said, rivers of living water will flow from them. You remember what happened after that woman came into contact with Jesus. We're told she rushed off to her village and she grabbed everyone she could. An entire village is following her to Jesus. She said, come see this man who's told me everything that I've ever done. She had tasted living water, and suddenly she becomes this stream of water herself. That's what Jesus says is going to happen to us. That we're going to be people that become living water. That we're going to become people that are transformed. And we're going to be people that are going to pass on this living water to other people. In fact, Ezekiel, at the very end of his prophecy, from about chapters 40 to 48, he's going to share a vision that he has of God. And in chapter 47, something amazing happened. He sees what starts out as a small spring coming out of the temple. I mean, the temple's been burned, so this is a vision that he's seeing. It's been destroyed, but in this vision, there's this spring of water that's coming from this temple, and it turns into this mighty rushing river not too long. In fact, it doesn't take long for it to become deeper. It doesn't take long before this river is rushing, and it's carving into the mountainside, and it's creating its own path. And this prophecy about this river, this vision, is about the church. It's about this spring of water that's going to turn into a river of water. And what was gently flowing early in the vision is going to be one where the current's getting stronger and it's going to be dangerous. And ultimately, the vision talks about it nourishing the land and bringing healing and bringing life, changing the environment into which it flows. And it's a promise of a time coming, a time in which you and I live, where because of Jesus, we've been given a new heart and a new spirit. And because of that, we don't just go to church. We're in the middle of a mission to reveal God to other people. We have been transformed. We have been changed. And we are revealing God to people around us, telling them, quit digging those cisterns. They don't satisfy. Experience the spring of living water. Experience Jesus Himself. God is using us to reveal His heart and to remind people that He's always waiting, always eager, always hoping to restore people's lives. If we let Him. If they let Him. Father, so thankful to You that You have come into our life and You have given us those new hearts, new spirit within us. And God, forgive us when we have dug our own cisterns, when we have chased after other things other than what truly satisfies, other than You. And God, forgive us too when we have been content to drink at Your spring, but we have not become a part of that river that shares it with other people. God, help us as transformed people to become a life-changing force, sharing that same message that we've heard with other people. Thank You in Jesus' name. Amen.